Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Aquí Alba Mar con ustedes, me pueden decir Alba. Estamos aquí para hablar de libros y algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello people, how are you doing? My name is Alba Mar, you may call me Alba. The channel name is Seriela. We're here to talk about books and some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. First of all, I want to welcome the new subscribers who are here because of some beautiful, wonderful, gracious mentions that I've received recently because of Nonfiction November. You know that it's my favorite event on Booktube. I'm going to link Olive's original tag down below, plus this original tag, which is also from Olive, and I've been watching this nonfiction on Booktube tag, and I hope it comes viral on Booktube. Yeah. So let's get going right away. Nonfiction on Booktube tag. The first question is, how much nonfiction do I read? I never kept count of this kind of stuff. But thanks to Katie at Books and Things, I now have my refrigerator tracker of the books that I'm reading. And I counted it. I counted the books that I've been reading so far this year. And it comes out to 53%. I've been reading 53% nonfiction. That includes my Puerto Rican nonfiction and my English language nonfiction. Yeah. What kind of nonfiction videos do you make or do you want to make? I don't make videos that are unique, I don't think, that stand out from the other kinds of videos that people do. I was thinking that one of my favorite videos that had to do with nonfiction was when I was waiting for Dorian, and I would talk about the book Dying to Better Themselves and the reactions that I had to that book, to the reading of that book. I might do some vlogging reaction videos in the future. I might. I'll think about it. But what I do want to continue to concentrate on are nonfiction books that have to do with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican history, Puerto Rican social issues, racial issues in Puerto Rico, politics, economics, and of course finance, because of the debt and promesa. Yeah, so I'll be concentrating on that. Number 3, what's your favorite subgenre of nonfiction? Mine is history, doesn't matter what country, and biography. I really like biographies. Number 4, do you have a favorite nonfiction book? Yes. And I just made a video about my favorite nonfiction books, both my Puerto Rican nonfiction books and the English nonfiction books, and I will link those down below. But I have one of my favorites right here, Los Chinos en Puerto Rico. Fantastic nonfiction book, Chinese in Puerto Rico. And the Shock Doctrine, and the Black Count, just in case. Number 5, what do you think keeps people from wanting to read more nonfiction? I call them the 3 Ds. People think that nonfiction is dense, dry, and dull. I myself would cringe at the thought of having to read some of the nonfiction texts that I was assigned at my undergraduate level. The driest, dullest litany of dates completely taken out of context. No. I can completely understand if someone doesn't want to read something like that. But I don't find that the nonfiction that I read is like that at all. I remember a way back, I'm going to put the picture up here of the cover of the book. Years ago, I was reading the review of a book written by Barbara Tuchman. I had never read anything by Barbara Tuchman, but the review of that book gripped me. So I ordered it, and I read that book about a medieval town in France. And the whole book is a study of this medieval town in France. And it was completely captivating. I can still recall the sensations that Barbara Tuchman evoked in me. I could smell the streets from the descriptions in that book. It was fantastic. I highly recommend A Distant Mirror, just in case. Why do you like nonfiction? Because of what I just described. Because if an author knows how to write, a nonfiction book can be just as entertaining as any fantasy, novel, romance, whatever. Yeah. And another reason why I like nonfiction is because what I learn in some of these nonfiction books excites me, moves me, and I find it so exciting to learn something new that I didn't know before. I remember when I realized, when I finished reading La Mordaza the first time, it's in the bottom of the pile. When I finished reading La Mordaza the first time, and I came to realize what was going on during the time that the Commonwealth was being formed. There was a gag law, and people were in jail. And if you had a Puerto Rican flag, you could be arrested. Things like that were happening as this new Commonwealth, this new creation, was being formed. Those realizations are the reason why I love nonfiction. Yeah, that's exciting to me. Number 7. What's a nonfiction book you read because of Booktube? So many. But the most recent one is Evicted. I told you about having read Evicted, and I'm sorry that I don't remember the person who recommended this book. All I know is that as soon as I heard about this book, I went off and looked for it on Overdrive and it was available. And I immediately borrowed it and started to read it. And I told you in my video that I was going to order it, and it came. Learned so much about the situation that people are in the United States and in Puerto Rico, and why they are being evicted, the circumstances in which they live. I highly recommend this book. But there are others. From the very first moment that I saw some of these channels, I remember seeing, I remember when I first saw this book, I think it was on Steve Donahue's channel, because he was talking about Edmund Morris. And yeah, I got this book because at some point I want to read, especially this one, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt, because it has a lot to do with the War of 1898. Yeah. But that's not all. Alan Moreton is responsible for this one that I'm going to read. The Real James Herriot, a memoir of my father. And I have the other one also. Alan, this is because of you. Number 8 is, what's the best nonfiction book you've read lately? Well, besides Evicted, there was Dying to Better Themselves, which was about the building of the Panama Canal, and Truman and Puerto Rico. Truman and Puerto Rico, The Origins of a Failed Decolonization Project. Number 9, what are some of your nonfiction reading goals? There are so many, because every time I read a nonfiction book, I will go down a rabbit hole. And before Booktube, I felt free to go down those rabbit holes. And I want to feel free to do that again. For example, when I read The Caribbean by James Michener, I wanted to go down the Caribbean rabbit hole, and that's why I started reading Dying to Better Themselves. And I'm going to read the other book by David McCullough on the construction of the Panama Canal, and I want to read about Haiti, and I want to read about Jamaica. I want to read about my neighbors in the Caribbean because of this book, Caribbean by James Michener. I also want to, besides going down the thematic rabbit holes, I want to do authors like Naomi Klein and Chomsky. I want to concentrate on some biographies of people in Puerto Rico and also around the world. I want to do a series of readings of the canon, what's called, because I'm reading No Friend But the Mountains by Behrouz Boochani, which you know I mentioned before. He's writing from a refugee camp in Manus Island. And it mentions here at the very beginning that this book belongs to a canon of literature written under duress and courage. In other words, literature written from prison. And I have books in the canon of literature from prison that I would like to read. So that's another thing, another project, nonfiction project that I would love to do soon. Number 10, what's your advice for incorporating more nonfiction into your reading diet. And Olive and Steve and a lot of people have already mentioned this idea, and I agree wholeheartedly. That is to combine fiction and nonfiction, like The Count of Monte Cristo and The Black Count. That's a tremendous combination. And as far as Puerto Rican literature is concerned, the novel Tiempos Revueltos is one possibility. And you pair up Tiempos Revueltos, which is about the nationalist insurrection, with Nationalist Heroines, which is about the women who participated in the nationalist insurrection. But another idea was given by, I just saw Steve give this idea, and I wholeheartedly agree, and that is incorporating nonfiction through graphic books. And I have a whole series in Spanish called Para Principiantes. This is out of Argentina. I got these from Argentina. And this is Proust Para Principiantes, for beginners, Gandhi for beginners, Gandhi para Principiantes, which is biography of Gandhi, but in picture form. Cervantes para Principiantes, Cervantes for beginners, in illustrated form. And I also have caricatures by Jesus Ortiz Torres, Cómo piensa el colonizado, which is about our colonized minds. Yeah. And I also ordered the book, that's another blame it on Booktube experience. I just saw Steve talk about, uses an example for that, the illustrated biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I also ordered that, but it's in a box somewhere, but there it is. And so yeah, the bonus question is to mention some nonfiction booktube channels, and of course there's Brianna, and I will link all these channels down below. She reads a lot of political science books and books on current events and topics, and I really enjoy watching her videos. And then there's Steve, of course, Olive, of course, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, as Steve calls them, including Margaret Richardson reads. And then I want to mention Lisa. I will link her channel down below also. It used to be Liken Books. I don't know if she's changed the channel name, but I will link it down below. She often shows nonfiction books. And there's also Rachel Rae, who often mentions nonfiction books. As a matter of fact,